Welcome. You have found the show we call Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? This is a podcast for men. And on this show, we will hear real life stories from men about how they have navigated the complexities of being a man in this modern day. We are going to look at the boys don't cry way of thinking and how that has influenced them and how they have risen above societal pressures to be true to themselves. The focus of this show is men's real-world experiences, not just ideas and theories. I hope that you will learn from what they have discovered and use it in your life as well. Let's get into today's show. I'm Brandon Archer. This is Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? I have been meaning for a while to explore doing solo podcasts, shorter ones than when I interview somebody. And today's the day we give it a go. And what I want to share with you is lessons I've learned from my son, lessons I've learned from being a father to a boy. And there are many, there are so many. It's quite incredible. For men that have children, you know what I mean. You know that being a father changes life, your perspective, but also having a boy does something a little bit different. I have a daughter as well, and we're very close, and I enjoy that relationship. But my relationship to my son is very different. And I reflected most of his life on, how my dad showed up for me. And like possibly many parents will go, I'm never going to do what my parents did. And unfortunately, until you have some awareness of how we operate, what triggers we have, you just fall into that. I did it. I fell into this rhythm of loving my kids immensely, but not treating them the way they deserve to be treated. And I'll be honest, I have times when I have a lot of shame over how I treated my kids. But I was doing the best I could with the tools I had. And if you're a parent listening, you are literally doing the best you can as a parent. You may be aware that your kids need more, or you could, air quotes, do better. But what does that even look like? We're all operating from a place of what we have. And as far as parenting or being a man in relationship, we're doing the best we can with what we have and what we know any given moment. And I share that because it's been very pivotal for me in dealing with many aspects of shame. One of them being a dad, one of them not giving my kids my best self, I'll call it. But when I reflect back on the different times when I maybe yelled at them or whatever it might have been, I was doing the best I could in that moment. And that's important. That's important to grasp that. That's important to believe it fully. Because what we do to ourselves is we might say, oh, I could have done better. Oh, I should do better. Yeah, okay. But in that moment when I'm speaking for myself, but I want to share this with you, I was doing the best I could. Was I emotionally healthy enough? Probably not. Did I have any tools? Almost zero. So how can I hold myself to a standard today with what I know, my better emotional regulation, with what I did 10, 15 years ago? That doesn't make any sense. It's not fair to that previous version of myself. So that has brought me some relief to the guilt and shame I have felt. Doesn't mean I wish I couldn't have done better. It means if I don't do that and let go of that shame, I can't be this version I want to be for my kids today. It's impossible if I hang on to that stuff. So my son just turned 19 a week ago, and it's very profound for me. I'm in Canada, and legal age in Canada is 19. So has he just become a man because he turned 19? Debatable. But there's a shift. There's definitely a shift between him and I, between his view of the world and himself in the world. And I kind of want to work backwards. I feel like working backwards with this podcast and with this share for you. My son moved in with me about 2.5 years ago, full time. And I was so grateful when that day came. The circumstances around it were very painful for him. I won't go into that because that's private. But from that day on, he and I have been able to bond in a way I've been hoping to do his whole life. We've always had a very good relationship, but I wasn't able to see him every day growing up. I think when we separated, he was about 5. So there's a big chunk of years there where I didn't wake up and see my son every day. And that was painful for me for quite a while. It's not that I didn't want to be there. It's just not the way the marriage went and the post-parenting dynamics. But he always knew I was there for him. So when he moved in, I felt so blessed that here we go. I get to have this relationship with him I've always wanted. And I understand being a 16-year-old boy is super fucking challenging. So I was happy that it happened at that time so I could pass on what I know, so that I could help guide him through the years of, teenage years of a boy, where can be very confusing. When he was 16, we actually did a rite of passage to manhood. And this is something people are always like, what the hell? Like, I've never heard of this being done. So let me start with how this came about. I was in a men's organization years ago and talked about rites of passage, and I learned about how we don't have a very clear way of becoming a man in this world. We just kind of graduate high school and you turn 19 or 21 or whatever it might be, and you're a man. But I wanted to give him the gift of, recognizing the transition from boy to teen/man. So I thought about it for a couple of years before. I'm like, how am I going to do this? What's it going to look like? And my grandfather was Cherokee. So I was already aware of different tribal style rites of passage, but I looked into my lineage, and it was one of the few, actually it's the only one I've ever heard of, where the rite of passage only takes place between boy and father. And I'm like, perfect, because I don't have a tribe of men that I could have done a ceremony with. So I thought about this for a long time, and it means a lot to me. And I hope it means a lot to him. I do believe down the road he'll go, thanks for that, Dad. But I'll tell you how it went. So the Cherokee version of this is a father takes his boy blindfolded out into the woods in the evening, starts a fire, and then leaves him in the woods overnight, alone, blindfolded. And the boy must face a lot of fears. There's wolves he can hear, there's rustling close by, and he's never sure what it is. So he really has to, stay as calm as he can, or face his fears. And if he makes it to the morning, the sunrise, which he could feel and he could see through the blindfold, the light, he could take it off, and he was declared to be worthy to be a man in the Cherokee Nation. And by the way, if anybody's listening to this and I'm getting this wrong, I'm going off the research I did. Please feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear more about the correct version. And here's the amazing part of this whole ceremony and why I love it so much. If he makes it to the morning and takes off his blindfold, he realized his father never left him. His father was beside him the whole time, quietly. And for me, it speaks volumes because I want my son to know that he's never alone, that he will have to face fears and he'll have to face hard times, but I'm right here if he needs me. Much the way in the ceremony, the father never left. So I won't explain the actual ceremony that we did, but it was along these lines. It was very powerful. I did blindfold him, did not leave him in the forest overnight. It was beautiful. I've talked about it in another podcast. I might even put a link to one in the show notes of one where I've talked about it. But then if I think about this, father never leaving the boy's side, and I think of other times in his life so far where he's had to face trials, he's had to face hard things, and I don't do it for him. I can't take away the pain from that. It's impossible. But can I be there with him? Yeah. One that I want to share with you is one day he took the public bus to school, and I happened to have to drive downtown to the main bus terminal. Drove him there, dropped him off. I went to the coffee shop. I thought he got on the bus, but then an hour later, I get a text saying, I need to meet you at the car. So I'm like, okay, odd, but obviously something's up. Met him at the car. We get in, and he explains to me that somebody approached him and asked to borrow, I think it was $60 for a cab because they forgot their wallet and they're going to come right back and pay him. So he actually went to the bank machine, got money out, and in his mind lent it to this person. Obviously, some time went by. He realized they weren't coming back. And when we got in the car, he was devastated. And he's like, I'm too kind. He said, I'm too kind, and started crying. And, every part of me wanted to rescue him from that experience, but that would not serve him in any way whatsoever. And that was probably, to date, one of the 2 or 3 hardest things I've had to witness as a father. But I learned a lot about being a dad, about living the values that I say I live by. I had to really dig deep in that moment and let him stand on his own, but still be by his side. And, before I was a father, I didn't know this was a thing. I didn't have this in my life. I was not modeled this. I grew up in a very interesting household. My parents did their best, but I did not have support like this. So I didn't know what it looked like to give it. But in these moments, I have the awareness that this is good for him, that I can't protect him from pain. I can't. but I can validate that he's in pain. I can witness his crying. I can make him feel like that is okay. And I'm very grateful that I get to give this to him because he deserves it. Every kid deserves this. And especially from our father to a boy, in this society. I mean, even the title of this show, Real Men Don't Cry, or Do They? It's still prevalent. And I see it when I'm out in public. Parents telling their kids, don't cry. That's nothing to cry about. Stop crying. And I'm like, oh my fucking God, are you kidding me? Like, we're still doing this shit? And we are, as a society. It is changing. It is shifting. I will grant you that. So, like I said, I'm kind of working backwards in my story, in my relationship with my son and the lessons. But that lesson for me was massive. And not only as, father to son, but as me as a man too. Like, nobody's fucking coming to rescue me. Nobody. And I know I operated from that place for a long time. So my son has helped me my relationship with him has helped me connect some dots where it's like, oh shit, I've been standing here waiting for somebody to rescue me. That's never going to happen. But can somebody stand beside me and support me? Yes. And that's a very different flavor um, than trying to expect somebody to save me from my own troubles, from my worries, from my anxiety, from my stresses, from my fear of doing the air quotes right thing that are aligned with my values. And my son was diagnosed on the autism spectrum years ago, high functioning. I don't really understand how the rating works, to be honest. And you would never know by meeting him. But what it gives him is this beautiful gift of not buying into societal bullshit. I love it. He's so real. He's so raw. He's just himself. And it's a beautiful, beautiful lesson for me on many levels because I have to slow down and I have to realize that he literally is so honest, is so transparent that I don't have to try to guess what he's thinking because he'll just tell me. And it's such a gift that he has and that I get to experience with him. And I'll be honest, when he was diagnosed, I was stressed out. I was a mess. I was angry. I was fearful for what's next for him. And in a way, my journey aligned with his in me developing some skills to take care of myself emotionally, to get aligned with my values so that I was ready to support him when he needed it. I think I'm so grateful now that it's happened the way it's happened. But at the time, it scared the shit out of me. And I think it scared the shit out of me because I didn't have the skills to support him at the time. So men that have kids, you realize, and you're listening to this, they are a catalyst. They can be a catalyst to get your shit together, whatever that looks like for you. I want to share one story. My son's brutal honesty. Don't remember how old he was. He wouldn't have been old, 7 probably. Post-divorce, I was flat broke. I had to buy a $600 car. And we were cruising along one day in this car. Their mom did quite well financially and was able to take them on trips and whatnot, and I was not. And I remember saying to the kids in the car, it's like, just a little life lesson. I didn't throw under the bus, but I'm like, hey, kids, just like, money is great and everything, but you can be happy without money. It's not how you become happy. And my son says to me, it's like, oh, Dad, you must be really happy then. Because he knew He didn't hold it over me, but he knew I didn't have much. And I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, shit. He just totally, I don't want to say called me out, but like just made an observation. It's like, well, if you don't have money, that must mean you're happy. Here's the reality. I was fucking miserable. I was fucking miserable. This is pre heart attack. So I was still in stress mode. I didn't really know what to do at that point, but he had a good point, and it really made me look at, oh, wow, I'm not happy. A 7-year-old boy just saying what he saw, just speaking from his heart. And that's one of the biggest lessons he's ever taught me. I think for me as a father, and I alluded to it before, our parents did their best, and sometimes they can't give us what we need and want. I think that's often the case. And I was bitter and I was angry for a long time about that, and my mother and father. And to have the opportunity to try to meet his needs, I love it. I love it. I think it's a huge challenge, but it's one that we have to face. We have to face it. I see a lot of fathers that run when marriages fall apart. And I understand. I understand the shame that comes up. I understand the sense of failure. I understand that maybe you think they need their mom more than me. That is complete bullshit. Your sons and your daughters need you every bit as much as their mother. What they get from you is different from their mother. And don't discount, they need you close. They need you in their lives. I was very lucky when I separated. There was a young man, I think he was 18 or 19 at the time, who had undergone a breakup with his mother and father, divorce around the same time as my kids, same age. My kids were like 4 and 5, I think. And I just asked him, what do I do, man? As dad, like, what do I do? All he said to me was, be there. That was it. It was so simple. He didn't have that. So he knew that's what kids need the most from their dad, to be there. So grateful for that incredibly simple but powerful piece of advice. And, I have do I have regrets? I probably do. But like I said before, I did my best post-divorce. I did my best. But I tried to be there for my kids. And I believe the relationship I have with my son now, and daughter for that matter, is partly based on that time that I did try. I tried to be there every weekend. We lived in separate towns, so it was definitely tricky, but it didn't matter. That was important. So, it doesn't matter if your kids happen to be 12 or 15 and maybe you have felt shame and you have not been there. It is not too late. It's not too late. You're their parent for life. Life. Doesn't matter when you're 75 and they're 50 or 45, you are still their father. You can help so much by being there now, whatever now is. That shame you feel is real. That can be dealt with. And go spend time with your kids. Reach out to them. Are they mad at you because you haven't been there? Maybe. Doesn't mean you don't text them once a week and say, I love you. I'm right here when you need me. It doesn't take this massive, giant, over-the-top expression. It can be very simple. It can be, hey, I know I haven't been there. I'm here now. That can be it. It doesn't have to be this long explanation of why, because it doesn't really matter. I don't know what I'm going to title this one. It'll be interesting. Originally, I thought, it was going to be lessons from my son. I don't script any podcast I've ever done. I was trying to keep this to 15 minutes. I'm looking at the clock. It's 25. I'm probably just going to publish this the way it is because that's the way I do most of these. And I hope you found value. Thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time to be here today. I honestly hope you found something you can use in your life. And I hope you found some relief in knowing that you're not the only one with challenges. We can be very isolated as men. If you don't have support in your life, please reach out to someone. It's okay to need help. It doesn't mean that you're less of a man. In fact, it takes a courageous man to know when it's time to ask for guidance. Until next time, brother.